Good morning. My name is Burrito Wallace, and I am a family parent educator with Wallace Family Ministry. Thank you for tuning into my channel as we journey through the Love Dare, and we are on day 6. This is the Love Dare for parents. Not for parents, excuse me, for marriages. I also have a Love Dare study going on for parents as well. So tune into that. It's very fruitful if you have children. So we are going to hop right in to the dare today and to our study. So we always start with a verse. He who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who captures a city. Proverbs 16:32. So love is hard to offend and quick to forgive. Okay, so love is hard to offend and quick to forgive. That is one of our key points today. Do you get offended and irritated easily? Okay, so that's another thing that I want you to really focus on asking yourself today. So some people live by the motto, never pass up an opportunity to get upset with your spouse. I've never even heard that before these books, but maybe you have. When something goes wrong, they quickly take full advantage of it by expressing how hurt or frustrated they are. But this is the opposite reaction of love, okay? And to be irritable means to be near the point of a knife, not far from being poked. People who are irritable are locked, loaded, and ready to overreact. And I have that here too. People who are irritated are locked, loaded, and ready to react. So when under pressure, love doesn't turn sour. Minor problems don't yield major reactions, okay? The truth is, love does not get angry or hurt unless there is a legitimate and just reason in the sight of God, okay? So I have that written down too. Love gets angry or hurt only when there is a legitimate and just reason, all right? So a loving wife is not overly sensitive or cranky, but exercises emotional self-control. She chooses to be a flower among the thorns and responds pleasantly during prickly situations. If you are walking under the influence of love, you will be a joy, okay, not a jerk. Ask yourself, am I a calming breeze or a storm waiting to happen? When we walk under the influence of love, we will be a joy to be around. Are you a calming breeze or a storm waiting to happen? Okay, so those are some questions that we need to ask ourselves, right? Are we a calming breeze or a storm waiting to happen? Are we a volcano just brewing and waiting to erupt, right? Life is a marathon, not a sprint. That means we must balance, prioritize, and we must pace ourselves. So too often we throw caution to the wind and run full steam ahead, doing what feels right at the moment. We're not taking a minute to pause. We're not taking a minute to just enjoy our surroundings, our children, our spouses, and instead, when we are just busy, and we're functioning like this, and we're not prioritizing and pacing ourselves and taking time to rest, what happens is we're just so overwhelmed. We become so overwhelmed, and we then become on edge. So we're just waiting for that thing to set us off, right? It wears our patience, especially with our families. So the Bible can help you to avoid unhealthy stress. It teaches you to let love guide your relationships so you aren't caught up in necessary arguments, to pray through your anxieties instead of tackling them on your own, to delegate when you are overworked, to avoid overindulgence. And it also teaches us to take a rest day, a Sabbath day, where we worship and we rest, right? And this allows us the opportunity to recharge, refocus, and add margin or breathing room to your weekly schedule. We need to take time to rest, okay? So what things cause us to be irritable? Stress. And we just went through that, right? You just went through the reasons why we get stressed, and we're just so busy, especially in this culture we live in. It's like everything is now. We just have to keep moving and keep accomplishing, and there's just so much pressure. But that pressure becomes pressure within us if we allow it to. We have to learn to slow down. We have to learn to prioritize. We have to learn to create boundaries where boundaries are needed, and to say, no, I'm not going to do this because this is going to be sacrificing the time that I have with my children or with my husband or with my family, right? We get stressed out. So stress causes so many issues with us. Not only the issues that we're talking about where we are just under constant pressure, but it also causes a lot of health issues within us as well. So the other thing is selfishness, okay? So selfishness is a problem of our heart, okay? And what does that look like? It looks like us becoming easily angered. It could be lusting after something. It doesn't necessarily have to be a person, but somebody or some things, right? Bitterness, greed, pride. These motivations can never be satisfied. When we are constantly giving into these things, they can never be satisfied. They're just going to want to be fed more and more and more. So we become more easily angered. We become more greedy. We become more lustful, more prideful. We become more bitter. We have to have the antidote for these things, and the antidote for selfishness is practicing patience and practicing love, okay? So we need to react to the tough situations in our lives with love, and I'm not saying that that's easy. I fail at this too sometimes, you know, and this is why I believe in doing these love dares, is to be practicing love in action. I haven't done them in a year. It was around this time last year where I started doing these, and it was so fruitful in my home. It was fruitful in my marriage, and it might have been a little bit before, maybe the beginning of May. But when we're practicing loving our families well, and we're saying, hey, like, I'm struggling in this area, so I really need to work on patience, right? For me, that's something that sometimes I really struggle with, and something I've been practicing a lot lately. And I've been doing pretty good with building up that muscle, so it doesn't go in atrophy and I'm just, you know, constantly impatient about things. Because we have to practice it, we have to build it, we have to create new habits to create change in our lives. There are certainly days or moments in the day where I'm like, I just feel like I'm going to lose my patience. I need to walk away and take a break. And sometimes we need to do that. But there's strength there, and especially instead of just going off the handle or reacting in the moment when it's unpleasant or it's going to affect somebody else, that becomes a selfish motive. That means I value how I'm feeling more than how it's going to affect you when I have an outburst over this situation, right? So we have to think about those things. How is it going to affect my spouse, right? If I am moody all the time, or angry at them all the time, or not kind to them, how is that going to affect them? How is that going to make them feel? So I am choosing to live by my own selfish ambitions and not caring about, you know, what that's doing to my spouse. I'm just reacting. So that does become a selfish act. And there was many years of my life that I spent very irritable. I can tend to go back there if I'm not careful, and if I'm not intentional not to, right? Because for many years, that's just kind of the environment that I grew up in. That's that's how I learned to be. It's just like every little thing to bother me. And there was a lot of chaos and discord, and so I just was like, oh, this is, and it was all about me and how I felt about something, but not really looking at how it's affecting other people or how they might feel, especially my loved ones. So it's something that I've had to really become intentional about. I don't want my kids to grow up to be irritated by every little thing. I want them to find joy. I want them to be grateful. I want them to be loving. I want them to display love to others, to be giving, and to have servant hearts, right? So if I'm going to teach them that, then they have to see that within me. They have to see that I am that person most of the time. Yes, we're going to get irritable sometimes. We're not going to be 100% perfect all the time. That's just not how we function as humans, and that's why we have something called grace. That's why we have forgiveness, but we should be quick to give grace and forgiveness, especially to our loved ones, and to admit when we have been wrong and make a mistake. I don't want my children walking around with that irritable attitude, because that's what it is. It becomes an attitude, and then they just spew it on everybody in their path. And this is how they function and learn to function on a daily basis. And that's really not the life skills and characteristics that I want to build in them. And I don't want the communication between my spouse and I to be this irritable tone all the time, where we're just constantly it's not kind, right? It's just not being kind. And I value kindness at this point in my life a lot, and learning what that really means, and peace, and having choosing happiness, right, instead of always choosing to get even. So there are times where it's easier for us to do this than others. I felt this past weekend that, I'll just give you a little bit of a story. I felt this past weekend, it was a consistent just moodiness. My husband, when he goes through things, he tends to internalize stuff, and he doesn't talk about them, so it comes out in moodiness, and just really just unkindness towards me. And I dealt with it, and I dealt with it, and I dealt with it, and I dealt with it. And then the weekend came, and then I reacted back to that, which was wrong on my part. So I should have, instead, and then we had a conversation where it's like, what are you going through? Because I don't want to keep being treated like this. This is a boundary for me, right? Like, this is not kind. And when the whole moodiness had been happening in days on end, I should have been able to go to him and say, hey, like, what's going on with you? Like, I recognize that something is going on with you. I really, hope that you can talk to me about this, and, try to talk to him about that and help him through that before it continued. And, like, hey, and this is how this is making me feel, before it continued. And then I got to a point of like, okay, well, now I'm kind of pushed over the edge, and now I'm going to respond to this. And that doesn't help a situation, and it's not creating any sort of fruit in our marriage. It's just creating a little more strife and discord, right, when we're responding. So we have to deal with things as they come. But again, these are things that I'm working on. But then you have days like, for whatever reason, that we just find it very difficult to do that. And those days, even though we find it difficult, we have to learn to become more intentional. And that's, giving ourselves grace also, and forgiveness. We got to a place where we're like, okay, like, thank you for hearing me. Thank you for listening. We listen to each other. We talk to each other. We forgive each other. We love each other, right? And that's great. There was this grace space there and forgiveness that we're always willing to offer up to each other when we can humble ourselves and admit when we were wrong, okay? So, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So really what comes out of your mouth is really what's in your heart, okay? So Sometimes we have to look at that and say, hey, I need to deal with what's going on here, because what's coming out of my mouth is really not good stuff. It's not fruitful, and I need to address what's going on inside of me right now, okay? So, being easily angered is an indicator that a hidden area of selfishness or insecurity is present when love is supposed to rule. Okay, so when your heart is lustful, it'll become more easily frustrated and angered. Bitterness takes root when you respond in a judgmental way and refuse to work through your anger. A bitter person's unresolved anger leaks out when he is provoked. All right, so greed for more money and possessions will frustrate you with unfulfilled desires. These strong cravings, coupled with dissatisfaction, lead you to lash out on anyone who stands in your way. And pride leads you to act harshly in order to protect your ego and your reputation. Fear of embarrassment causes overreaction. These motivations, again, can never be satisfied, okay? But when love enters our hearts, it calms us down and it inspires us to quit focusing on ourselves. It loosens our grasp and it helps us to let go of unnecessary things, okay? So love is going to lead us to being forgiving instead of holding a grudge, to be grateful instead of greedy, to be content rather than rushing into more debt. Love encourages us to be happy when someone else succeeds rather than lying awake at night in envy. Love says share the inheritance rather than fight with your relatives. Okay? It reminds you to prioritize your family than to sacrifice them for a promotion at work. In each decision, love ultimately lowers our stress and it helps us to release the venom that can build up inside. It's the antidote, okay? It then sets up our hearts to respond to our spouses with patience and encouragement rather than anger and exasperation. All right, so it's hard to recognize things in ourselves that need to change. That is hard. It's a hard pill to swallow. Sometimes it makes us feel all sorts of things inside. Like this video could be like, I'm just feeling kind of angered right now, or irritated by talking about this. Well, why is that? Because when something's affecting us, it's because it's going on with us, right? When something is affecting us, if it didn't mean anything to us, if it didn't if you're just like, that doesn't really apply to me, it wouldn't even affect you. But when it's bothering you, when it's stirring stuff up, we have to think, well, maybe there's some truth to this. So let me find where I'm getting irritable, where this is showing up in my life the most, how I respond to my spouse, what kind of relationship dynamic do we have on a daily basis, and what is it that I want? What do I want from my marriage? Do I want to be in this irritable state all the time where we're both, or maybe it's just me, or, where we're quick to offend or easy to offend and it's hard to forgive? Or do you want joy in your marriage? Do you want gratefulness in your marriage? Do you want connection with your spouse? Because constantly being irritated with them and just walking around in that sense is not fruitful and it's not substantial. If we are in a marriage that functions like that, whether it lasts forever or not, it's going to fizzle out. That connection piece is going to fizzle out, and whether you're living in the same house or not, you've kind of already went your separate ways. Eventually that will happen, right? We have to work on practicing love for them and not being irritable and learning how to not be irritable, and the root causes of irritability, stress, and selfishness. So we can see where we struggle with our selfishness, because we all do, and we can work on those things. We can practice loving instead, right? So we react to tough situations with love, okay? It's not always easy. Like I said, I told you that story about this past weekend to let you know that, like, I'm not teaching these things saying not anything I never struggle with, because it is. And I need to go on this love journey for my marriage and my children as much as we all do, right? And I think it's not something that it's like a one-time thing and you're done. Sometimes we have to revisit certain areas for sure, where we're saying, hey, I'm really struggling with this in the moment. So what can I do to turn this situation around? Well, I can be more or less irritable. I find myself being really stressed lately and it's making me irritable. So how can I limit the stress in my life? Okay. So our dare today is choose to start reacting to tough circumstances in our marriage with love instead of irritation. Okay, this can be tough sometimes. Begin by making a list below of areas where you need, or on your notebook, okay, to add margin to your schedule, and then list any selfish motivations that you need to release from your life. Okay, so that is our dare for the day. Get the books so you can look back on your responses and the answer to the questions, where you can really see the fruit of your work, of your labor, of how practicing these dares every day are really building fruit in your marriage. So I thank you for tuning in today. Remember to subscribe to my channel, like my channel, share me with your friends, especially if you know somebody who would benefit from this study, or even, the study as a whole, or even just today's study. But I appreciate you guys. I love you. Take care and God bless. I will see you tomorrow.